Hello and welcome. Today we are talking about food insecurity. What is it? How does it affect me and those around the world? Who is Green Iglu and how are they solving food insecurity in the Arctic? In today's presentation, we're going to answer those questions and more. Sit tight, stay tuned, we're going to be getting started shortly. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. Be sure to mute your audio if you're not presenting. We want to make sure everyone can hear whomever is speaking clearly. We will have designated spots for your questions and comments throughout the presentation. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, enter them in the chat box so we can present them at the designated times. Keep in mind, we are recording this for other students to view later. Any documents, handouts, or links mentioned in this virtual classroom will be shared at the end of the presentation. And lastly, enjoy the presentation. Sit tight, we're going to be getting started here soon. Nearly 70% of Inuit homes in Nunavut are food insecure. This food insecurity rate is 8 times higher than the Canadian average.
Una iglu.
This is our home.
Manilak pugor akuni.
We've been here for generations.
Amiso koyang ipoksuli.
It might not look like much,
Kawi salwang iputi.
but you're not looking hard enough.
Nuna umabo.
The land is alive.
Nagjuti ayong iput inui ayokon nagpagpo.
Animals thrive, seasons weather, our people adapt.
Nuna asit jiso umabo uke ulema.
It has changed the same way every year.
Kadlunanon ikayok tawnin nalawalakatta.
We relied on the South for too long.
Mana at yung itume asit jakparlengma.
But now new changes are happening.
Nutami pigang nakhalakpugo.
We've begun a new chapter.
At yung itume nunabot mi perok titilakpugo.
We have found new ways to feed the North.
Ayong ilakpugo.
It's our time.
Perok siyo nalakpugo nikhinitamani.
We can now grow food in the Arctic.
We're all good to go, right? Cheryl, can you hear? Okay, everybody else can hear. All right. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we will let Julia take the stage.
Formerly known as Project Green North, Green Iglu started as an exploratory project to better understand the difficulties of living in Canada's remote northern regions. In 2013, the organization worked hand-in-hand with the community of Nunavut, previously known as Repulse Bay, to construct a pilot growing dome project in 2015. This geodesic greenhouse was the first of its kind in the Canadian Arctic. The community of Nauyet believed in their mission and embraced the technology, calling it their Green Iglu. The organization has been at the forefront of agriculture in Canada's north with their designs, methodologies, and technology. Today, Green Iglu is recognized as a Canadian charitable organization and has built multiple growing dome facilities across Canada. Joining us today from Green Iglu is Julia O'Quinn. Julia facilitates digital lessons with K through 12 students on topics including food security, food sovereignty, nutrition, and botany. She believes that it is through our collective knowledge of these subjects we will be able to build, grow, and empower a food-secure future together. Before Green Iglu, Julia worked at Teach for Canada, a nonprofit organization that recruits, supports, and prepares educators to teach in Northern Indigenous communities. There, she worked alongside First Nations education leaders to ensure education to Indigenous youth is being delivered in a good way.
Special San Andreas High School virtual classroom series, Experts Around the World. I'll be co-hosting. My name is Christopher Michael Jaramillo. I'm with the Growing Hope Project at San Andreas. Also joining us today is we have Barbara Pasacek, we have Sean Fitz, and we also have Miss G. So thank you guys. And of course, thank you to all the students who've come to participate. So today we have Julia O'Quinn. She is a member of Green Iglu. And she will be our professional expert as to Green Iglu and their operations up north in Canada. And so at this point, Julia, we can go ahead and let you take the stage.
Is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so I'm not able to hear anybody right now. So maybe for the questions and responses, if you guys can just type them into the chat, that way I'm able to see them. So good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all virtually today. I know times are a little bit more challenging than usual right now. So I'm thankful that we can still find ways to connect with one another from home. As was mentioned, my name is Julia, and I am joining you today from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, which is the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples who have lived here since time immemorial. Today, we are going to start by learning about how the food we eat is connected to where we come from and the challenges that people around the world face when it comes to accessing nutritious quality foods. From today, I hope you will take away a better understanding about how what we eat depends on the region of the world that we live in and its relation to other locations. Also, after this lesson, I hope you will have a better understanding about food security challenges that are all over the world and some solutions that have been developed to address them. So I'll begin by telling you a little bit about myself. I am Indigenous, what you may refer to as Native American. And my family is from an island off the east coast of Canada, which is commonly referred to as Newfoundland. So you can see this on the map. It is where the yellow pin is. Almost all of my family members still live on this island, which in the winter season gets snowfalls that pile up over 7 feet high. So because of where they live, a lot of the food that they eat comes from plants and animals on the island, as well as other items that are brought in by freight across the water. Right now, while I am in university studying public health, I live on Vancouver Island, which is on the west coast of Canada. And again, you can see this on the map, and that's where the red pin is. Here, a lot of people grow food locally to eat, but because of the number of people living here, we also rely on boats to bring in more food. In terms of the work that I do, I am a team member at Green Iglu, which, as you may already know, is an organization who helps communities across northern Canada grow fruits, vegetables, herbs, and more in greenhouses called Green Iglus, which we'll look at a little bit later. Similar to those of you guys who grow lettuce, microgreens, and other vegetables in your plant factory, we work with students in the Arctic to do this as well, but in a way that is more suited for their cold environment. So now that you've had a chance to get to know me a little bit, I would love to learn a few things about each of you. Can I get you to type into the chat bar your favorite food and the thing you love most about where you live? baked potato. Good choice. Edna, my favorite food is also soup. Growing up, my mom made a lot of moose soup. So that was definitely a favorite of mine for a long time. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for your responses. We will begin by diving into today's lesson, beginning with an understanding of what food security is. So food security is defined as not having access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food to lead a healthy lifestyle. In other words, this means in our day-to-day lives, we only have access to foods that are either low in nutritional value or in general, we don't have enough food to meet our body's daily needs. Households may be food insecure for several reasons, including due to financial constraints. And this is unfortunately true for 1 in 8 Canadian households. When it comes to the severity of food insecurity, there are 3 different levels that we can use to understand the issue, which are marginal, moderate, and severe. Beginning with marginal food insecurity, this means that a person worries about running out of food in the near future or has limited food at home. Moderate food insecurity means that a person has no option but to compromise the quality or quantity of their food. So someone experiencing moderate food insecurity might have to make the decision to buy prepackaged processed foods as opposed to fresh foods because they don't have the means to buy the healthier, more expensive choices. Lastly, experiencing severe food insecurity means that a person must reduce their food intake and at the most extreme, go periods of time without food altogether. So someone in this position may have to skip certain meals in a day because they do not have the means to access or purchase food. So there are lots of reasons around the world why people may face food insecurity. Let's start by taking a look at Nunavut, Canada, which you can see on the map here has the highest rates of food security in the country at 46.8%. So this is significantly higher than anywhere else in the country. These alarming rates of food insecurity have been declared a national emergency and is why at Green Iglu we have focused our projects on this area of the country to date. So Nunavut in northern Canada is an enormous territory that is much colder on average than most other regions of the world. It is not uncommon in the winter months that the temperatures reach minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So for those of you who said you like warm weather, this is probably not the place for you. On the shortest day in the Nunavut capital, called Iqaluit, the sun rises and sets within 4 hours. And the further north you go, the shorter the winter days will get. Each year, communities north of the Arctic Circle don't see the sun at all for stretches at a time, although the sky may lighten a bit on the southern horizon around noontime. At the summer solstice, however, which falls on July 21st, so kind of right in the middle of the summer, the sun shines for a full 21 hours in the capital, with a few hours of twilight around midnight. So as you can see, some seasons get an abundance of sunlight, while others get very minimal. You can imagine that because of these cold conditions with minimal sunlight for the winter period of the year, not many plants grow here naturally. Nunavut cannot consistently provide the warmth, the sun, the water, and the nutrients, which are all things we know that plants need. So a question for you guys, is there anything you want to know about maybe what living in Nunavut would be like? I've never lived there myself, but I have visited quite a few times, so I can probably answer most of your questions if you have any.
Do you want us to write in the chat at this point, Julia, or do you just want people to be able to verbalize it?
Barbara, do you mind if I get you just to write in the chat just because
Yeah.
I'm unable to hear anybody? What do you do for fun? A lot of people will go ice fishing together, skidooing together. A lot of people play hockey up north as well, so they kind of make their own rinks and sort of make little teams and have scrimmage games and things like that quite often. So a lot of outdoor activities, but obviously your body becomes acclimated to the colder weather the longer that you're there. So the first day when you get there is kind of a shock to the body. But after a couple of days, you start adjusting. Typically, there are sometimes paved roads or gravel roads, and normally everyone does have a car, or some people will share cars for kind of moving things around in the community. We'll get to this later, but they are brought in by the big freight ships, and that's kind of how they get there. In terms of jobs that people have, everything is sort of local. So you could either work at the band office, which is like the government office. You've got teachers who work in the school, support staff as well. You do have people working at the local store too. And that's pretty much it. It's just a self-sustained small community where sort of everybody is helping each other out. Unfortunately, in most communities in Nunavut, there is no fast food. There's usually only one store, maybe two per community. So that is where everybody gets their food from. I think that is all. Oh, there was one more question about skidooing. It's basically like a vehicle you ride on and it goes really fast over the snow. That's a lot of fun. Okay. Wonderful. So we can move on to, I think, the next slide. How many people? So the smaller communities are probably made up of around 200 to 300 people. And the largest community in Nunavut, I would imagine, is about 3,000 people. So even at 3,000 people, it's still a very small community where everyone knows everybody and everything that goes on for the most part. So back to a little bit about Nunavut. There are some types of plants that do thrive in a northern climate and have become accustomed to the weather in the north, but not many of them are actually edible. So one great example is Labrador tea out here in the photo, which is a wetland shrub plant. The leaves of this plant are strongly aromatic and can be used to make a type of delicious herbal tea. This has been a favorite beverage of the Inuit people who live in Nunavut for thousands of years. So while it's a great source of flavor for drinks, these plants are not a substantial source of food, similar to most of the plants that grow in the north. So what then are the sources of food in northern Canada? The source of meat and other traditional foods in northern Canada come primarily through hunting, trapping, and fishing throughout different seasonal periods. The Inuit peoples in Nunavut consume traditional foods such as polar bear, beluga, Arctic char, caribou, and seal regularly. In their neighboring territory of the Yukon, people eat moose, caribou, and salmon on average at least once a day. And all of these sources of food remain extremely important in their contemporary diets. Thinking about the island where my family is from and somewhere I've spent a lot of time, there has always been a lot of crabs and lobsters there to eat because they live in close proximity to the water. In many places, these sea animals would be considered a delicacy, but in Newfoundland, they are very common things to eat. This source of food, I always remember being abundant and fresh, as it's a place that is surrounded by water and where people generally take really good care of the water so that the animals can thrive there. Based on where you all live, I would guess that the most common types of meat you eat are poultry, pork, and beef, as San Bernardino traditionally has had a lot of farmland. where certain types of animals are raised specifically as a source of food. The meat from chicken, cows, and pigs are also widely eaten in many parts of Canada as well, as agriculture is possible, but mainly in central southern Canada. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the traditional foods that I mentioned? And again, I'll just ask you to put it in the chat if possible. Yeah, so seal is something that they eat pretty commonly. The fat from the seal is usually used as a sort of oil that's used for cooking, similar to how we might use olive oil or vegetable oil, things like that. So it's kind of a substitute. I have never hunted myself or shot a gun, but I have been along on hunts as more of an observer. Bears, yeah, polar bears as well. So this is a common source of food. Actually, on one of my visits up, I was able to see a polar bear, which was pretty fascinating. The temperature is about, the coldest it would get, I think, is about minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. So you've got to bundle up big time if you're going to go there. Okay, so I think we can continue on here. So as for the fresh produce, such as the fruits, vegetables, and wheats of their diet, these cannot be grown in Nunavut due to the cold weather, the ground permafrost, and varying levels of sunlight, which I mentioned. So to be able to access these types of foods, which offer us healthy nutrients such as vitamins and minerals, communities in northern Canada have to have them regularly transported in. So you might wonder, how is everything transported into the community? I'll continue on. So everything in the community is brought in by a sea lift, which is basically a large ship that transports almost everything into the community, which includes vehicles like trucks and cars, household items, so furniture if you ordered a couch or something like that, and all of their food. Because they are not available in the north and the communities are not connected to the south of Canada at all by roads or by railway. The sea lift is a vital link for all of Nunavut communities and their residents to get their annual resupply of goods and materials needed throughout the year. Typically, the sea lift takes place between June and October each year. During the winter, it is extremely dangerous, as you can see from these videos, to travel due to weather conditions in the winter. So the time between deliveries can often lead to empty shelves at the local co-ops or northern stores. So recently, you may have actually been experiencing shortages at your own stores due to COVID-19 and people buying up in bulk certain items at the store. So this reality of going to the store and seeing empty shelves is sadly a lived reality for many people living in the north year round. If you are someone who might be interested in learning more about the journey these sea lifts take and the excitement of the community members when they finally arrive, you can check out the show High Arctic Haulers, which is on CBC. I believe Cheryl has included a link to this on the flyer, so that would be an easy place to find it. Okay, so let's take a look at the exact routes the sea lift takes to get to the communities in Nunavut. Here you can see the 25 separate communities of Nunavut. So like I mentioned, they are not connected by road or rail to any other Canadian cities further south, which means that the best option is to have everything shipped in by boats. You can see that the routes the boats take are very long. Canada is the second largest country in the world, and Nunavut itself is a very large landmass, meaning that these ships have to travel vast distances to get to each community. I saw a question pop up about how long it normally takes. I would say at the shortest, a couple of weeks for sure, and can take up to months in the places that are a little bit further away. So the long distances food travels to get to the communities really means two things. One, it takes a lot of time for items to get shipped up there. And also the fuel and resources needed for the trip costs a lot of money. So for the stores and communities who are responsible for covering the cost of the shipment, they then have to raise the prices of the food that is brought in order to pay for the expenses of the trip and also make a profit on the food. So also because of the distance, there is a chance that foods could possibly actually go bad during the trip. So as we know, each type of fruit and vegetable has a certain length of time before it starts to lose its freshness. Oftentimes because of the length of the trips to Nunavut, by the time they actually reach their final destination, the produce doesn't have much shelf life remaining. So to get a better idea about the costs involved with sea lift transportation, we have a few photos here that were taken at local stores across Nunavut. So you can see that for some of the food items here, prices are very expensive, especially the fresh foods such as grapes, peppers, and apples. Again, because of the costs associated with shipping, the prices of fruit and vegetables can get really expensive, making them unaffordable and inaccessible a lot of the times to the people who live there. Meaning that oftentimes what happens is people end up buying less expensive but less nutritious foods. Barbara, would you mind giving us an idea about what the costs are like for these items in your community? Hopefully everyone else will be able to hear you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We're good to go, Barbara.
Okay, so in there, from what I recall from the screen, we had peanut butter that was on there, and the price of the peanut butter seemed to be very comparable with what we have here. Said about $2.49 for the peanut butter. For the grapes, $28 a pound is awfully expensive. Out here, I know that we can get the grapes in a good season, sometimes for 60 or 70 cents a pound. And then when they're out of season, it might be more like a couple of dollars or $3 a pound. The water, we have that exact name brand out here of Nestle, $104.99, $105 for a case of water. No, we can get that a lot cheaper out here with some of the sales. That might be $5 or $6 for that whole case. When I'm looking down at the bell peppers, I see that the green ones are about $10, and I believe that's a pound. And then the red bell peppers are $16 a pound. Again, we would get those for less than a dollar a pound for the green, and then for the red, they usually are a little bit more expensive, but probably not much more expensive than the green bell peppers. Apples, that's not too bad of a price for a bag of apples, but we do know that we can get them a lot cheaper out here as well. And then your ketchup, when I'm taking a look at that, the Heinz name brand on there is about $14. We wouldn't be paying that much for a bottle of ketchup. It would probably be more like the $6 or $7 that you have for your generic name brand of ketchup there. So there is a little bit of a difference, or quite a bit of difference for us than what you have for your store. I think there are some questions coming in through the chat or some comments. We do have that problem here, and I think they're going to address that. I think that Julia is going to address that about coronavirus and some of the limitations that we have here. But where Julia is presenting from right now, Julia Quinn, she is saying that is pretty much year-round for them. That is not just a temporary
yeah. So
point.
Another interesting thing related to Cheryl's comment about being able to shop at different stores is that in the north, they actually typically only have one store called a co-op or a northern store where you buy everything that you need. So because of this, they're unable to shop around for cheaper prices or look for deals. So if there's an item out of stock at the store, say you really want peanut butter, unfortunately, you're going to have to wait until the next shipment comes in order to buy some. So does anyone have any questions about the shipping methods or how long it takes? Feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. Okay, so we will move on. So one way that is used to compare costs across Canada is the nutritious food basket indicator. So what this indicator tells us is the price of feeding a family of 4 a healthy diet for 1 week. So by comparing this indicator across different areas of the country, we can better understand what regions are facing the highest prices and by extension struggle with the highest rates of food insecurity. So for anyone who has been to Southern Ontario before, specifically Toronto, the estimated weekly cost of the nutritious food basket for a family of 4 is $198, which per month adds up to about $860. Relative to other cities in Southern Canada, Toronto is usually considered to be the most expensive. With this said, in the capital of Nunavut, the nutritious food basket cost is $403 per month. So this ends up amounting to $1,612. So as you can see, compared to Southern Canada, the prices in Nunavut are nearly double the cost for the exact same amount and type of food in Toronto. So prices, known also as affordability, is one concern that was shared with us by those living in the North that impacts their food insecurity. The other concern, as I briefly mentioned earlier, is spoilage. So a lot of people we spoke to were concerned about the spoilage of fruits and vegetables. So like you can see in the photos here, spoilage means that the quality of the fruits and vegetables are no longer good for us to eat. So because of the time it takes for food to get transported to the north, it can sometimes actually go bad by the time it arrives. So take zucchini, for instance. This has a shelf life usually of about 2 weeks, and usually the sea lift trips are longer than this. So if they're not properly stored, they will go bad before they actually arrive. So sadly, this is a waste of food, and also means that there is not enough food arriving in the community for people to eat at all times. So as a result of the high prices and spoilage, among other issues, the prevalence of food insecurity is alarmingly high. So compared to the 1 in 8 Canadians that are experiencing food insecurity, 46.8% of people in Northern Canada face food insecurity every single day. So this is something that is very troubling, especially for young people and their important years of development. I'm going to just take a look at some of the comments here. So the food basket just consists of things that we would consider healthy to eat. So these would be fruits, they'd be vegetables, they would be whole wheat foods such as pasta and bread, things that we traditionally eat that aren't processed, maybe like chips and candy and things like that. Those wouldn't be considered in the food basket. In terms of a limit of children, no, there's no limits. But obviously something to consider when deciding to have more children based on what's available in the community. Yes, so we will definitely get to the health problems a little bit later on. But the rates of cancer in northern communities are much higher than the rest of the country, in part due to the lack of healthy food that's available. Cheryl, if I can get you just to flick to 2 slides. Wonderful. So here you can kind of see a visual representation of the people in Nunavut So this northern part of Canada, so 46.8% of them are facing food insecurity on a day-to-day basis. So as one solution to these concerns that we've been talking about, at Green Iglu, we have designed greenhouses that are specially made to withstand these Arctic conditions, called Green Iglus. So by using these greenhouses, communities in northern Canada now have a way to grow their own fruits and vegetables in a central community space that is designed specifically for this purpose. So growing produce locally means that there's no more transportation involved, so that the food is fresher, less expensive, and more nutritious. So on the next slide, we can see what the Green Iglu actually looks like. So here is the outside on the left and the inside on the right of the Green Iglu greenhouse, which communities in northern Canada are using right now to grow their own produce. Last year in Arviat, Nunavut, the people used their Green Iglu to grow over 7,000 servings of leafy vegetables like spinach, kale, and also green beans by using hydroponic towers. They also grew over 700 servings of root vegetables like potatoes and carrots in traditional growing beds that are contained inside the Green Iglu. So on the inside, the Green Iglu is suited with a hydroponic growing system, which, as you guys know, does not require soil for growing, and it uses water very efficiently. So the materials used to build the dome are fully equipped to withstand the harsh Arctic winters, handling wind speeds of over 180 kilometers an hour and 7 feet of direct snow. So for the communities, this means that they're able to grow their produce fresh year-round. So beyond the benefit of having food more readily available in the community, there are also other benefits that a local growing dome brings, which are economic opportunities and educational programming. Once the growing dome is up and running, people from the community have the opportunity to become employed there as Arctic farmers that monitor and track the progress of the produce that is growing. Additionally, students can visit the growing dome to learn all about the process of growing fresh food, which helps to build their personal skills and knowledge too. So through training and education with youth and community members, the infrastructure becomes fully owned and operated by the community, enabling them to grow food, provide jobs to people in the community, and offer unique learning opportunities for students. Does anybody have any questions related to the Green Iglus? I'm going to take a look at some comments now. The hardest thing for building the greenhouses, I would say, is the initial transportation of the materials up to the community, just because there's so much that goes into it and everything is sort of brought up all together. Normally with the full team working on the dome, they take about 7 to 10 days to get fully constructed. And normally this is due in large part to a lot of helping hands from the community members as well. On rainy days, yeah. So just because of the cold, a lot of the time it does snow there, and the outside shell of the igloo is totally prepared to handle all of the weather elements that come its way. Yes, it definitely can get that windy there, especially in the winter season when it's especially cold. So nothing too drastically different than a normal greenhouse, just besides the materials that are used to build it. And then on the inside, we have the vertical hydroponic growing towers, which use a lot less water than traditional growing methods, and also don't require soil. Yes, they definitely are insulated. And there is a water pool on the inside, which the sun kind of reflects off of to help keep the temperature regulated in the igloo, as well as some insulation as well. I would say there are tornadoes, but very few and far between. That would be a rare occasion to see that happen. Okay, wonderful. So we will continue moving on here. So when it comes to traditional meats in the community, like I mentioned earlier, one way people in Nunavut reduce their food insecurity is by using and consuming all parts of the animal. So this is extremely valuable for us, as each different part of any animal can offer us nutrients that help us grow. Generally, traditional meats provide people with lots of healthy fats, which is a great source of energy for our bodies. By finding ways to enjoy and use every part of an animal, there is more food available for people and therefore less food insecurity. So where my family is from, a lot of people traditionally eat caribou, which is hunted normally during the months of February and March. So caribou, as you can see from the chart here, helps our growth and development in many ways. The meat gives us protein, which helps us repair our muscle, skin, and blood, as well as iron, which helps us from getting tired. The liver of the caribou is a source of these nutrients too, as well as others like vitamin A, which helps us fight off infections. So a lot of the time, animal skins are used as well for clothing items and footwear, called mukluks or moccasins that help people stay warm during the winter months. So while not all places in the world use every part of animals, this lesson about minimizing waste can be applied to all of our lives. So for example, if we think about bananas that might be going bad, many people would probably choose to throw these away when instead they could be frozen or reused for banana bread or for smoothies. So finding creative solutions like this means that we waste less food and by extension, less money on food as well. So depending on the location of every community, food systems and our diets are going to vary. Different types of food species that are available will continue to depend on local wildlife and natural resources, as well as our connection to large-scale food production facilities. What is available from the land and in our stores is going to be different all over the country and across the world as well. So now that we've talked about northern Canada, let's take a look at where I live on the southwest coast of Canada. So as I mentioned earlier, I live on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. Here we also receive shipments of food by sea transportation. Although the distance it travels to get here is not nearly as far as it is to northern Canada. In the first image, if you look closely from the shore, you can see a ship off in the distance. A close-up version of this same ship is in the second photo as it's approaching the dock for delivery. So from these images, I hope you can get an idea that ships travel a long way to transport food, which for residents of the island means that the food costs will normally be a little bit higher and the quality may not always be as good. As a way to address food insecurity that might be the result of this expensive imported foods here, we have found ways to encourage local food production. On the next slide, here are a few photos from my community. We are very fortunate, like you guys, to have milder weather. So many people can grow fruits and vegetables on their property and offer them for sale to people living in the area. Many people grow food outside in their yards, in community gardens, and on larger scale farms, which is then sold at local food markets. So also because we live in a place surrounded by water, it's relatively easy to go fishing and crabbing. This is something that a lot of people do on the weekends. So you can see the excitement here on the kids' faces after seeing how many crabs they caught that day. Does anybody have any questions about where I live? So the weather here is still relatively warm, not as warm as you guys, but right now it's probably about 12 degrees and the sun is shining. So it's a beautiful day. And this time of year is the time that people have started to grow their fruits and vegetables in their home gardens. So they're sort of at the smaller stage right now. And a few months from now, when they're fully grown, these sort of farmers markets pick up, and a lot of people are selling there on the weekends. The warmest it gets, it's probably 25 degrees here in the summertime. On the total of the island, there's probably about 1 million people. And there definitely are thunderstorms. It rains quite a lot here. So that's also really great for growing plants outdoors because it gives them a very natural, consistent source of water as well. All right, so let's move on to where you guys live. Looking a little bit closer at San Bernardino. From what I know, the summers are typically hot, arid, and clear, while the winters are long, cool, and partly cloudy, making it a great place to raise cattle and also grow produce. For many decades, San Bernardino was a place where a lot of farming happened. So the land always provided what the county has needed to sustain itself. In more recent years, there has been a trend of urbanization happening in the Riverside County Greenbelt. So what used to be traditionally farmland is now being converted into residential areas to house its growing population. So now the areas where food used to be grown have been fully transformed into houses and buildings where people are living. Because of this, there is not as much food being produced locally as there used to be, and the number of people living in the area is going up. So this means that for each person living there, there is less food on average available. From the graph on the left-hand side here, you can see that over the past 33 years, Southern California has lost approximately 327,000 acres of agricultural land in Orange, San Bernardino, Riverside, and Los Angeles counties. So in order to address this shifts and the challenges it presents, there are innovative solutions like your guys' plant factory being built indoors to grow nutritious food that can be used by the community. So without projects like yours, food security in your area might be more prevalent. So the work that you are all doing is very, very important. Looking beyond North America, reliable access to nutritious foods is a problem too that many people around the world are facing. So on this map here, you can see areas in other continents, including Africa and Asia, that are experiencing food insecurity as a result of various types of risks that these countries are facing. So these risks include natural disasters such as droughts, floods, cyclones, and severe cold temperatures, species invasions from different types of pests, disease outbreaks, and political conflicts. So a lot of different reasons here. To stay up to date on the current risks that are impacting access to food, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization provides documents like this one here on the screen to help us stay informed. So let's take a closer look at a couple of countries and the challenges they are facing that impact food availability for the people living there. So Somalia is a country located in Africa that has been experiencing widespread food insecurity over a number of years due to a couple of different reasons. So in 2018, 2 years ago, food insecurity was a result of a drought that had been happening there for quite some time. So you can see in the bottom photo that the land is very, very dry there. A drought is a type of natural hazard where a country does not get enough rainfall during the year to keep its plants and animals alive in order to use them as sources of food. So in the past, there has been consecutive poor rainfalls and harvests that led to well below average production and large-scale livestock losses that have reduced access to food for people. So because of the below average rainfall, crop production was also 70 to 80% below average that year. Now in 2020, Somalia is facing the worst desert locust outbreak it's seen in 25 years. So taking a look at the top photo there, desert locusts are a type of swarming grasshopper that are one of the most devastating migratory pests in the world. So they are highly mobile, moving around a lot, and feed on large quantities of any kind of green vegetation, including crops and pasture. So far, the locusts in the area have damaged approximately 70,000 hectares of land, which means lower food production again for the people there. In Bangladesh, this is a country located in southern Asia who has been experiencing widespread food insecurity since 2017 due to an influx of people coming from the nearby country, Myanmar. In Myanmar, there has been local conflict going on, which caused people there to feel unsafe and want to leave. So since December 2017, over 900,000 refugees have relocated to Bangladesh to escape the conflict. So now with all these people living in one country, there has been a problem producing enough food in order to feed everyone. As a result of the lack of the food, the UN reports that many people have adopted negative coping mechanisms, which include relying on less expensive and less nutritious foods, reducing the number of their daily meals, and restricting adult consumption, so leaving food for the children. As you can see, there are many different cases of food insecurity across the world. Regardless of the reason we might be facing food insecurity, there are long-term implications for everyone across the world who does not have access to affordable, nutritious foods. So whether we experience food insecurity because of financial constraints, natural disasters, pest infestations, or any other reasons, the implications for people that live for long periods of time without reliable access to nutritious food are the same. So someone had wrote in the comments earlier about the health implications of not having healthy food. So here we are sort of looking at that. If we do not regularly eat food that is nutritious, we end up becoming vulnerable and prone to more diseases. So oftentimes we can develop diseases such as diabetes, cancer, or hypertension, and there are costs involved in visiting the doctor and paying for prescription medications or medical procedures. So these costs then make it more difficult for us to purchase expensive, nutritious foods. I'm just going to take a look quickly at some comments that I see coming in here. So in the north, I believe that's what you're referring to, Britt. Generally, the cancer rates and the rates of diabetes are higher there, again, because of the food concerns that we talked about. In terms of doctors, basically what happens is once a month, a doctor flies into the community and is there for a day or two, and we'll see everybody at that time. So some communities have medical centers, but in terms of if you needed medical procedures, sometimes you either have to fly out of the community into a larger city, or on occasion, a physician will get flown into the community for a one-day procedure. Okay, so looking more at the healthcare costs that are associated with low nutrition foods. Cheryl, if I can get you to pull up the graph there, wonderful. So this graph here shows us more specifically the healthcare costs in the most densely populated province in Canada that are associated with the different levels of food insecurity that we talked about earlier. So you can see that as a person's experience of food insecurity becomes more severe, so do the healthcare costs that are required for treating illness and disease that results from a poor diet. So if we work towards ways of addressing food security together, we can improve overall health and reduce the amount of money we have to spend on keeping ourselves healthy. So this trend also applies to other countries around the world where food security is prevalent too. Although the exact cost of annual healthcare per person is going to vary. So as you can see, there are health implications of food insecurity that affect many people. With this said, there are a lot of amazing initiatives and projects like the plant factory at your school, the Green Iglus in Northern Canada, and local food production where I live that reduce our risk of being food insecure. We are all part of a movement of people that are starting to take food production into our own hands instead of solely relying on large-scale food producers to grow everything for us. So this movement that I'm talking about is called the food sovereignty movement. Food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food that is produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their own food and agriculture systems. So in other words, this means that we have a right to food that is good for our bodies and that is produced in a way that does minimal harm to the environment while it's being grown. There are many benefits of food sovereignty, which include building local knowledge and skills. So by having a plant factory at your school, you get to learn how to grow and nurture plants. Similarly, the students that I work with in Nunavut also have learned to grow plants because they now have the hydroponic systems in their community that can be used for hands-on learning. So this type of knowledge and practical skills we can now pass on to future generations so they can continue to learn and do the same things. Food sovereignty also gives communities ownership and control over their food production. So by finding ways to grow our own food, we get to decide what we want to grow, how much we want to grow, and how we want to distribute it or share it with our families or communities. And then lastly, food sovereignty teaches us that food is sacred, that food is a gift of life. It is something to be taken care of and not squandered. So in practice, food sovereignty can look like a lot of different things. On the last slide, here we are. We have a father and son planting seeds together in RV at Nunavut. So they are helping to grow food for their community. Food sovereignty also looks like students learning to harvest produce for the first time and taking it home to share with their families. So those are the children in the second photo there. Food sovereignty is also supporting local food producers like the ones I showed you from my community. And food sovereignty also looks like all of you, growing in your plant factory, for your school, and for other people in your community. I hope you all keep up the really great work that you're doing there and get a chance to get back to tending to your plants as soon as it's safe to do so. Also, at any times, if you guys would want to send me photos of you guys in the plant factory, I will definitely make sure those get featured on our Facebook and social media pages. So that is all the content for today. I'm not sure if we have time left, but I will take a look at some comments and questions that we have here. I think in terms of what grows the most, it would probably be the leafy green vegetables like kale and spinach. So typically those grow the fastest and can be harvested multiple times before having to be replanted. So I would say that would probably be the most popular one. In the communities that have the growing domes and are harvesting produce regularly, this will actually reduce the cost between 40 and 70%. So it's quite significant compared to the prices that we saw together in their stores. And where I live right now, food is definitely not as expensive as up in northern Canada. It's probably comparable to larger cities such as Toronto. And a little bit of the higher cost can be attributed to the travel, so the boats that are bringing the food across and the cost involved with that. Yeah, so in terms of the temperature in the Green Iglu, just because of the shape of it, the sun, when it kind of shines through, a lot of that heat is kind of held on the inside of the structure. So that's part of it. And then there's also a pool on the inside that is reflective, and that helps to maintain the temperature as well. Yeah, so in terms of using animals that are hunted, again, most parts, including the organs like the heart and the liver, those things are actually all consumed as food typically. And then there are other parts of the animals, like the antlers, like the skin, that are used to produce normally clothing items or household items. that have a functional purpose, and typically the clothing is very, very warm and helps when it's during those cold time of year. So there are different types of plants growing in the greenhouse. There are a lot of the green veggies are in the hydroponic system. So those are the leafy greens and the green beans, like I mentioned. But there are also lots of root vegetables like potatoes and carrots that we harvest as well. But those are grown in traditional root beds just because they cannot be grown in the hydroponic systems. In terms of what they do with the food after it's grown, that's entirely up to the community. So oftentimes they will donate it to the schools, or they'll donate it to community centers, or sometimes they will sell it through the store. So it's really up to each community once the food is harvested, what they decide to do with it. I think I've had a chance to get to all the questions, but please send them if I missed any. So I think, Chris, that is everything for this morning. Sure. So Andrea said what she liked about the presentation, learning to appreciate what we have, seeing the resourcefulness of your community is awesome. That's really wonderful to hear. Obviously, there are some obstacles that we are constantly having to overcome, but it's sort of this all hands on deck mentality where everyone is helping out each other, and coming up with these solutions has been really helpful for the communities in the north. Gianni says how expensive produce is. Are you referring to the north, or are you referring to where I live? In the north, I would say prices are typically about double of anything that I would buy in more southern Canada. So Edna says how the community lived and what they ate. So traditionally up north, people live a subsistence lifestyle, which just means living off the land a lot of the time. So hunting and fishing primarily as a source of food. And then beyond that, anything that supplements their diet is shipped in. And then Jesse says the weather and climate in the Arctic. So seasons do change, but typically all year round it is pretty cold up there, getting to about minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit in the wintertime would be the coldest it would get. And Chris says, it's so crazy to me that the food baskets are that much money. Yeah, so considering, they do cover 4 people approximately per household. But it is sad to see the variance between the different regions of the country, and to imagine that, for the exact same amount of food that I could buy here for $200, they're having to pay at least $400 there for the exact same thing. So definitely concerning. Yeah, Cheryl. So when there is medical emergencies, typically what happens is they are just airlifted out of the community and brought to a larger facility, normally either in Thunder Bay or one of the closer by cities. in order to have their procedures. And a lot of the time, this means that family, unfortunately, can't come along or have to travel separately. And then they will return to the community once they've had the time to have their procedure and to heal as well. Okay, yeah. So I was saying yesterday to Barbara that when I was up in Nunavut, I had a chance to actually check out one of the northern stores up there. And I was really looking forward to having a watermelon. And I went to check out the watermelons, and actually it's $70. And typically, I think where I live, they might be about at maximum $10. So I could definitely not afford this watermelon and chose not to buy it. And Raymond, yeah, so in terms of what we feed pets, again, there would be dog food available that is shipped up to the community, or a lot of the times the dogs will eat similar foods to what everyone else is eating, meats from different animals and fresh sources of food like that. A lot of people actually have dogs on the reservation, so sometimes they're owned by people and sometimes they just sort of roam free and are sort of communally owned and taken care of. Yes, someday I will get that watermelon, definitely. I have a garden that I've started a couple weeks ago and is well on its way growing now. So hopefully in a few months' time, it's still looking good and I'll have my own watermelon. There's definitely no limit of children in the communities. It's actually the fastest growing population in Canada is the Indigenous youth. So that's why it's so important that we are building things like these green igloos that are going to be good to sustain the populations. So one dome typically feeds up to 600 people. So depending on the size of the community, there are communities that also have double domes as well that are a little bit larger. So populations range in Nunavut. Again, some of the smaller communities might be a couple hundred people to a few hundred people. And at the largest would be about 3,000 people. So again, even with 3,000 people, you do get to know everybody in your community. So definitely some friendly faces. And a lot of the smaller communities will have family members in residing communities as well. Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for spending some time with me this morning. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
And please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any follow-up questions or thoughts that come to you later on in the day. I would love to keep this conversation going with you.
Oh, I just pressed mic.
Gigi, please mute yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And again, thank you everybody for coming. I don't know. We'll see how long this whole COVID-19 thing continues out, but maybe we should try and plan for another one with another speaker sometime soon.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, Ruben.
I miss you, man. I feel alone in here.
I'll miss you
I
too,
learned
Ruben.
nothing.
We were saying that we needed to invite you guys to come and visit our classroom more. So this was fantastic. And if we have another one, I know that, and with a little bit more notice, there's some other teachers who would have had their class join.
Yeah.
So I thought this went terrifically well, and I'm proud of everyone. And I'm so grateful that Miss G got her class to join, and it was a lot of fun. So thank you for all the hard work on that. Much appreciated.
Awesome.
This one very started when they had an accident in the lab in China.
In where?
In China, they had an accident in the lab in China.
Okay, well, hey, Raymond. That's not what he's talking about, but that's okay, Raymond. We'll talk about that part later, okay? He's talking about a lab accident in China.
I know.
Interesting.
It's on Facebook. My sister know that too.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get off here.
Thank you.
Let's see. Who do we still have here?
You welcome.
Cheryl and
Thank you.
Barbara.
Yes.
Bye, Chris.
I'm going to send you guys a link for a quick recap with Julia. So just a quick recap. I want to talk with her and just have us talk about what happened and just get some feedback. So I'll text. Yeah. I'll text you, or I think I can just send you an invite through Google Hangouts. Yeah, I'll text you once I send the invites out so you guys are aware. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Yes. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, Sergio.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.